Hi, how are you? So, when should we have Mark do the announcement about the offering? About now?
Yeah, how long does it take? Is it going to be that long one?
Yeah.
I might give it a minute and just launch in. Do they have any other business?
Not that they told us about.
Okay.
Yeah. The only thing is how to get this crowd quiet. I don't know how Mark's going to do that, but we'll see.
What is that chain looking thing? Oh, okay. Oh, for real? Oh, yeah,
the
cool.
webcast, we're going to start right at 10:30 with Mark. I know. Oh, he's nailing that. Yeah. I'm amused. Because that would be a little. Yeah, because that would be a little. I'm sorry.
Hello. What's that?
Good morning. Good morning. May I invite you to find seats as quickly as possible. Before we begin our worship service, Mark Watanabe would like to tell you a little bit about our offering this morning.
Wow, there's quite a few out there. Good morning, everyone. We wanted to let you know that our offering this morning will be split among 3 beneficiaries. The first recipient of the offering will be Living Cully. Living Cully is a Portland-based organization. It is an innovative collaboration between Habitat for Humanity, Portland Metro East, Hacienda Community Development Corporation, Native American Youth and Family Center, and Verde. Together, Living Cully partners create economic, ecological, and social benefits for Cully neighborhood residents. More than 50 Regional Assembly participants spent time at Living Cully yesterday, led by staff of the Unitarian Universalist College of Social Justice. These 50 adults and youth spent time learning from and working beside Living Cully residents. But this morning, we want to give all of you the opportunity to help make a difference in the lives of the people who live in this city that has been our host. The second recipient of this morning's offering will be the Pacific Western Region Youth Program Scholarship Fund. We know that youth programming transforms and saves lives, but we also know that some youth and their families struggle to afford the cost of attending district and regional youth events. Since its inception in 2016, the Youth Program Scholarship Fund has allowed nearly 100 of our regional youth participants to travel to and engage in over 30 different covenantal, spiritually nourishing Unitarian Universalist events. We want to help even more youth attend these events, especially youth who are economically disadvantaged or come from historically marginalized communities. The third recipient of the offering will be UU Rise. Based in Southern California, this organization, grounded in Unitarian Universalist values, offers direct services, including legal services to immigrants. In the news, many of us have learned about the arrival of a caravan of Central American asylum seekers fleeing violence and poverty. UU Rise already has plans to offer assistance on both sides of the border to these people. During the past year, UU Rise has also offered invaluable counsel and guidance to several congregations in the Pacific Western region who have opened their doors to immigrants seeking sanctuary. To make it as easy as possible for you to be as generous as possible, there's going to be several ways you can give this morning. Certainly the classic cash or checks in the basket, even online or electronically. Details and instructions will be displayed on the screen at the time of the offering. Please be generous. By doing so, you can make a difference in the life of a person living here in Portland, seeking affordable housing, in the life of a Unitarian Universalist youth seeking belonging, and in the life of an immigrant seeking safety. Thank you. And now come, let us worship together.
River, there's a 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 river, there's a. Any basses in the house can help me out with that? It goes like this. River, there's a river, there's a river. There's a river. That's it. Keep going. That's it. There's a river. There's a river. There's a river somewhere that flows through the lives of everyone, and it flows through the mountains and the and the meadows of time. Will you sing that with me? There's a river. There's a river somewhere that flows through the lives of everyone. And it flows, and it flows through the mountains and the valleys and the meadows of time. And the altos go like this. There's a river somewhere that flows through the lives of everyone. You got it, you got it. And it flows through the mountains and it flows through the mountains and the valleys and the meadows of time. Sopranos, why don't you join us? Here we go. There's a river somewhere that flows through the lives of everyone. And it flows through the mountains and the valleys and the meadows of time. You got it yet? You got it yet? Here we go. I want to hear you. Here we go. There's a river somewhere that flows through the lives of everyone. And it flows through the mountains and the valleys and the meadows of time. One more time. The river somewhere that flows through the lives of everyone. And it flows through the mountains and the valleys and the meadows of time. Next part goes like this. Oh, yes, it do. Oh, yes, it do. Sing it with me. Oh, yes, it do. 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 Yes, it do. Oh, yes, it do. Oh, yes, it do. Listen, 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 listen. There's a star in your eye that brightens the lives of everyone. And it shines through the mountains and the valleys and the meadows of time. Will you sing it with us? There's a star. There's a star in your eye that shines through the lives of everyone. And it shines through the mountains and the valleys and the meadows of time. Oh, yes, it do. 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 There's a river. There's a river. There's a river somewhere that flows through the lives of everyone. And it flows. And it flows through the mountains and the valleys and the meadows of time. Yeah, thank you. That's lovely singing, y'all. That's some pretty fantastic singing. I don't know about you, every time I hear this tune, the spirit of the Temptations rises up within me. And if it is doing so with you, then I invite you into the moves. They're really cool. It goes like this. Yeah, basses. There's a river somewhere that flows through the lives of everyone. You know what I mean? Here it is. And it flows through the mountains and the valleys and the meadows of time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's do it again. There's a river. There's a river. There's a river somewhere that flows through the lives of everyone. And it flows through the mountains and the valleys and the meadows of time. Oh, yes, it do. Say, oh, yes, it do. Oh, yes, it do. Oh, yes. There's a star in your eye. There's a star in your eye. Shines in the light of everyone. And it shines. And it shines on the mountains and the valleys and the rivers of time. There's a star. There's a star in your eye that shines through the lives of everyone. And it shines and it shines and it shines through the mountains and the valleys and the meadows of time. Oh yes it do, oh yes it do, oh yes it do. Yeah, oh yes it do, oh yes it do. Oh yes it do, oh yes it do, oh yes it do. Oh yes it do, oh yes it do. Oh yes it do, oh yes it do. Oh yes it do, yes it do, oh yes it do. Oh yes it do, oh yes it do. Oh yes it do, 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 oh yeah, oh yes it do, oh yes it do, oh yes it do, oh yes it do, oh yes it
That was my mic test. It failed. Would it be a Unitarian Universalist worship service without Mary Oliver? I'm covering my bases. In trees still dripping night, some nameless birds woke, shook out their arrowy wings and sang slowly, like finches sifting through a dream. The pink sun fell like glass into the fields. 2 chestnuts and a dapple gray, their shoulders wet with light, their dark hair streaming, climbed the hill. The last mist fell away. And under the trees, beyond time's brittle drift, I stood like Adam in his lonely garden on that first morning, shaken out of sleep, rubbing his eyes, listening, parting the leaves like tissue on some vast, incredible gift.
We light this chalice for this vast, incredible gift of life, to which we are reborn every day, and the fire in our bellies that calls us to live with a spiritual ferocity and an ever-expanding love.
So we have in our plan for the morning a body prayer. We already kind of did one, at least I did over on the side. What about you? And I wasn't imagining we would be so close to each other. So we're going to try and do a body prayer without injuring anyone else's body. And we're going to acknowledge that some people, because of their body's needs, will alter what they're doing, or because for them prayer wants to remain something quiet and non-bodied in obvious ways, will let you choose your mode of prayer. And I want to say up front that I was someone who always resisted embodied prayers and actions and would roll my eyes and slink down in my seat. And this one was taught to me in seminary, and I don't remember what the framework around it was. But I do remember the motions of the prayer. And they came back to me a few years ago when I really was yearning for something that wasn't just seated and head bowed as part of my prayer life and the beginning of my day. So I'm going to tell you what it's come to mean for me, acknowledging that I hope I am not violating anything in the great give and take of religious expression, and invite you also to think about in the future that you might engender the prayer with something of your own. And also to say that when I lived in India, which was the previous 2 years, I went to the ashram of Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, a teacher and a guru in India who teaches an embodied prayer and breathing. And I loved what he said about it. He said, if it doesn't bring you more peace or more happiness, don't do it. So all of our spiritual practices, I think, should be engaged in that spirit. We try them, we experiment, and if they don't bring us more peace or more happiness or whatever it is we're looking to pull into our lives, then there are lots available to us, and we need to find ours if we haven't already. So I'm going to show you the motions. I would invite you to rise if you're able, but although most of the body prayer is from the waist up. And I will explain it through, and we'll sort of practice it together, and then we'll just have time to practice it without narration. So let me walk through it once while you're seated so everybody can be sure to see. So first, starting with your hands clasped together, you raise your arms up. It can be an aspirational move, raising our head above the weeds, looking at the greater perspective, a gesture of awe. Then we open our arms out. Now, this is the part where we can't injure the people next to us. So we may have to do it small now, but I invite you when you go home to do it big, because it really, do you know the whole thing about the power position? I mean, this has a lot of resonance. Anyway, so pull your arms as wide as you feel comfortable without hurting the person next to you, which may not be very wide. And when I do it wide, I feel present to the blessings of the day and the abundance of them, this vast, incredible gift that we hold in our arms every day. And if you hold your arms out long enough, they get kind of heavy. So you really feel the largesse of the world. Then you turn your hands and the way I think of it is you run them through the blessings scattered at our feet, and you try and hold some in your hands, but are you aware of how many slip through your fingers, how few we can hold? You pull them up and press them into yourself. Blessings from the world that you take with you, that you hold on to, that you become an expression of. And then you offer yourself to the world. As you are, enough, what you have. The other blessings will be gathered up in someone else's hands and taken into them and offered to the world. And between us, we'll make it through. So it's clasped hands, reaching up, gratitude, opening up to the fullness of the blessings of the world, feeling the generosity and weight of that, pulling into us what we can, knowing it is ours, and offering it to the world. I invite you to do this prayer, seated or standing, whatever works for you, a few times on your own, and then we'll call ourselves back to song prayer.
the song of the American rabbi says to us that the world is made of mercy. The world is built by loving kindness. And he sings it this way. Olam chesed yivaneh, yararai, yararai, yararai. Olam chesed yivaneh, da da da, da da da, da da da. And then he sings, Olam chesed yivaneh, da da da, da da da, da da da. Olam chesed yivaneh, da da da, da da da. I invite you to pray that with me. Olam chesed yivaneh, da da da, da da again. Olam chesed yivaneh, da da da. One more time, Olam chesed yivaneh, Olam chesed yivaneh, da 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 da. Olam chesed yivaneh, da 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 da. Olam chesed yivaneh, everybody. Da 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 da. Olam chesed yivaneh, da 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 da. Olam chesed yivaneh, da 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 da. Help us with the percussion. Olam chesed yivaneh, da 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 da. Olam chesed yivaneh, da da da. Olam chesed yivaneh, da 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 da. Olam chesed yivaneh, da da da. Help me let it down very gently. Olam chesed yivaneh, da da da, da da da, da da da. One more time. Olam Heseim. Amen.
We are going to share a message for all ages written by beloved colleague Ken Sawyer. There was a boy named Ethan, and he was feeling lonely. Ethan was lonely because he didn't get to spend enough time with other kids. There were other kids in the neighborhood, like Kavita and Devin and Reiko and Matthias and Lorena, but they never seemed to get together. So Ethan decided to form a club. Ethan called up Kavita and Devin and Reiko and Matthias, and he invited them over to his house. He did not invite Lorena because she once gave a party and she forgot to invite him. I mean, later she said she was sorry, but Ethan wasn't going to forgive her for that. The other kids came over. Ethan told them,
we should have a club. In fact, we should call it the Perfect Club. That's what we'll call it, the Perfect Club.
That sounds good, said Reiko. Sure, said Devin. Only how do you have a perfect club?
Oh, that's easy. Everyone has to do everything just right. As long as we're all perfect, our perfect club will be perfect. And we can hang out together and have fun and do things together all the time. Like now, we could go outside and kick the soccer ball around.
And that went great, except that after a while, Matthias got frustrated and angrily kicked the ball into the street. After that, he calmed down and felt bad and said he was sorry. But Ethan said he was out of the Perfect Club and he would have to leave. Matthias went across to Lorena's house. You remember Lorena, she wasn't in the Perfect Club because she once forgot an invitation. She was at home working on a fun art project, and Matthias worked on it too.
Meanwhile, back at Ethan's house, the Perfect Club was having fun too. Except when Reiko missed a kick and fell down, Kavita laughed at her. When Kavita saw that she had hurt Reiko's feelings, she felt bad and she said she was sorry. But Ethan said she was out of the Perfect Club and she'd have to leave. So she went across the street to Lorena's house. Then Reiko said it wasn't her fault that she fell down. It was because Devin was such a clumsy fool that he had tripped her. But when she heard her own words, they sounded mean. She felt bad. And she said she was sorry. But, well, you know the rest. Reiko ended up at Lorena's house too.
The Perfect Club was getting really pretty small. There was me, the founding leader, and Devin. But Devin was still glad to be part of the club, and it meant we got to kick the ball around together, and he played, and he played, and he played until I said, maybe you could let me have a turn. And Devin said, yeah, sure, in a minute, and went on kicking the ball himself.
Ethan did not want to lose the only other member of the Perfect Club, so he tried very hard not to notice that Devin was not sharing. But then Devin kicked the ball hard into Ethan's stomach. Devin said he didn't mean to, and he was sorry, but Ethan said,
"You are out of the perfect club."
And Devin had to leave.
And he did. He went across the street to Lorena's house. He could hear a bunch of his friends having fun inside. At last, all the people who weren't perfect were out of the perfect club, and only Ethan was left.
Trouble is, now I'm lonely again.
But Ethan realized that he was alone because he didn't always do the right thing either. Every time someone messed up, he had not been kind or understanding, patient or forgiving. He realized he didn't belong in the perfect club either.
So I went across the street to Lorena's house and I said I was sorry. And Devin and Reiko and Kavita and Matthias and Lorena forgave me right away.
After that, they formed another club. It wasn't perfect because none of them was perfect, but it was a very nice club. They always said sorry when they messed up, and they always forgave each other. They hung out together and they had fun together. And best of all, they were never lonely.
A minister who was studying to be a Catholic priest before he found his way to Unitarian Universalism said he missed the ritual of confession. He missed the humility and honesty of it. Many of you may know that Thomas Starr King, when asked to describe the difference between Unitarians and Universalists, put it this way. The Universalists believe that God is too good to damn people, and the Unitarians believe that people are too good to be damned. Had we come to believe, God-centered or not, that we were too good beyond reproach, or had we just forgotten the discipline and power of naming where we fall short so we can begin again? Reflecting on all that, I invite us to engage together in the Litany of Atonement penned by the Reverend Rob Eller Isaacs. The response is often read, but in our Teal hymnal, Singing the Journey, Les Clean has written a sung response, which Glenn Thomas will teach you.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in
For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again.
For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin
For each time that we have struck out in anger without just cause.
forgive ourselves and each other. We begin
For each time our greed has blinded us to the needs of others.
forgive ourselves and each other. We begin
For the selfishness that sets us apart and alone.
forgive ourselves and each other. We begin
For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit.
forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again.
For losing sight of our unity.
Forgive
For these and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness. As the late Reverend Orlando Brunola once wrote, in words both prayerful and generously forgiving. As we move through life, finding ourselves always newly wise and newly foolish, we ask that our mistakes be small and not hurtful. We ask as we gain experience, we do not forget our innocence, for they are both part of the whole.
It's going to have to go in the reverse direction in a couple of seconds, so prepare yourselves. Today we have the holy opportunity to engage the music of Black America. And when we engage the music of Black America, we must know some things. One, we are on holy ground. So we must walk gently and lightly with curiosity and humility. We cannot understand the music of Black America without understanding the deep and rich importance of the metaphor of walking and standing and moving with legs and feet. And we must also understand the music of Black America as one that continues to widen its embrace. In this venue, in this moment, we will not step on the metaphors of Black ancestors by rewriting their words. But we will move gently
into the metaphor for those among us for whom the symbols have taught us pain. Hold those both gently with me. And let's enter into the space with the humility and curiosity we know how. It works with the music this time. Maybe not again. It's me, Lord, 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 it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Have mercy, it's me, Lord, it's me, Lord, it's me, Lord, it's me. Lord, it's me, Lord, it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Have mercy, it's me, Lord, 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 it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Have mercy, it's me, Lord, 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 it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Have mercy, it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Sopranos, will you join me? It's me, oh Lord, oh, in the need of prayer. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Altos, will you join us? It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Tenors, come on. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Listen, not my mother, not my father, but it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Not my sister, not my brother, but it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Sing it with me, not my mother, not my mother, but it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Not my sister, not my brother, but it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Then I say, it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. How about this one? Not the preacher, not the teacher, but it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Not the deacon, not the usher, but it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Sing it with me. Not the preacher, not the teacher, but it's me, oh standing in the need of prayer. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need. Can we just get drums? Just drums. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Will you sing it with us? It's me, oh Lord. You got it. Standing in the need of prayer. One more thing for you. It's me, oh Lord. You got it. Standing in the need of prayer. Your turn. It's me, oh Lord. There we go. Standing. We're ready for you now. Come on back in. It's me, oh, standing in the need of prayer. One more time. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Not my brother, not my sister, but it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. And not my father, not my mother, but it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Not my brother, not my sister, not my brother, not my sister, but it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Not my father, not my father, not my sister, but it's me, oh Lord. Here we go. Standing in the need of. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. It's me, oh Lord, standing. Last time. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Let's take it home, y'all. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer.
I feel knee deep in prayer. I want to give the choir a moment to get back to their seats. Thank you to the choir. Thank you to the choir. Thank you to the musicians. Thank you to Glenn Thomas. Thank you for taking us in music. Did you feel that? The second reading is from the Psalms, New International Version. It's a time of psalms and lamentations. It's not the first time, and it won't be the last. And there's some strange comfort in hearing the shared struggles of people against injustice and the destruction of what they love, what they hold holy or sacred through time. So go back in time with me to that which echoes through time. Help, Lord, for no one is faithful anymore. Those who are loyal have vanished from the human race. Everyone lies to their neighbors. They flatter with their lips, but harbor deception in their hearts. May the Lord silence all flattering lips and every boastful tongue, those who say, by our tongues we will prevail, our own lips will defend us. Who is Lord over us? Because the poor are plundered and the needy groan, I will now arise, says the Lord. I will protect from those who malign them, and the words of the Lord are flawless, like silver purified in a crucible, like gold refined 7 times. You, Lord, will keep the needy safe and will protect us forever from the wicked, who freely strut about when what is vile is honored by the human race.
Mercy, mercy me. All things ain't what they used to be. No, where did all the blue skies go? Poison is the wind that blows from the north and south and east. Oh, mercy, mercy me. All things ain't what they used to be. No, no. Oil wasted on the ocean and upon us, fish full of mercury. Oh, mercy, mercy me. All things ain't what they used to be. No, no. Radiation underground and in the sky. Animals and birds who live nearby are dying. Oh, mercy, mercy me. All things ain't what they used to be. No, no. What about these overcrowded land? How much more abuse from man can they mercy, mercy me. Oh, mercy, mercy me. All things ain't how they used to be. All things ain't how they used to be. All things ain't things, all things, all things, all things ain't how they used to be. Oh, mercy, mercy, mercy me. All things ain't how they used to be. Oh, mercy, 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 mercy me. No. Mercy, mercy.
Oh, mercy, mercy me. Oh, things ain't what they used to be. No, no, no. Oh, mercy, mercy me. Marvin Gaye's album was What's Going On was released in 1971. The story has it that he laid the tracks in record time. Years ago, I heard, but it may not be true, but I heard that Smokey Robinson came over to listen to some of the tracks and remarked that Marvin had written some great songs. I didn't write them, Marvin said. Smokey Robinson must have looked confused. This is God's album, Gaye said. All of the songs on the album, if you know it, came out of the troubles of the times. Dawning awareness of the plan's desecration, the Vietnam War, the ravages of racism, and ongoing carnage of white resistance to the civil rights movement, the assassinations of Kennedy, Malcolm X, King, to name only the most obvious casualties. There was a president you could not trust. So much falling apart around them. It was an album for its time, and for ours too. Oh, mercy, mercy me. Oh, things ain't what they used to be. It's not surprising that in the face of so much wrong and evil and destruction of what is good, that there is the desire to call wrongdoers to account. You can hear it in Lamentations in the Hebrew Scriptures, the cry for rescue, for justice. It's an ancient urge, it's a human one. Some desperate attempt to wrest the world back from the abyss, to right it and begin again. There's been a lot of calling to account in the last couple of years. One recent, most marked example was the explosion of the calling to account of men, and to a lesser extent women and trans folks, people who had misused their power and sexuality. The first stories that broke were about where that power was misused in professional settings. Of course, a power that can be misused anywhere. And all the places carry consequences for people on the powerless side of the equation. In the workplace, in addition to fear or the reality of professional punishment for those who rebuff advances or speak out, there is also the danger of sidelining, which is just a less obvious form of punishment. But the effects don't end there, right? For those on the receiving end of the behavior, there is often anger, a sense of betrayal, humiliation in the aftermath. And the victim often ostracized, their claims minimized, their character cannibalized. The experience of rape, if the abuse goes that far, brings with it the whole spectrum of trauma and recovery involved under any circumstances in which that violation is experienced. At the very least, the legacy for women of workplace harassment and worse is the corrosive reinforcement of the message we get too often and from childhood onward, that we in particular are objects to be used, enjoyed, and then rewarded or discarded as others deem fit. So it was with no small bit of take that many women, and not just women, watched famous, powerful people fall. One just this past Thursday. The wake-up call had been sounded. Enough is enough. A long overdue era, perhaps will finally come to an end, and maybe one decisive battle in the eons-long war on women on these shores will finally be won. I was one of the ones who celebrated. I was glad for justice, for honesty, and the stripping back of secrets. Secrets almost never protect the vulnerable, right? Though sometimes they claim to. So strip them back, tell the stories, all of them. And there were some awful stories. Repeated predators protected by a whole slew of employees and institutions and colleagues. Horrific stories. And then the avalanche of Me Too stories. And we began to wonder whether anyone we looked up to would be left standing, honorable, when all of this was over. So it was an unsettling, good, hard, painful, and uplifting time. In the midst of this roller coaster of feelings, however, I began to notice a creeping dis-ease that accompanied my reading of the latest chapter of news, something I couldn't quite put a name to. I realized part of the discomfort was that lesser and lesser offenses that came to light were being held to the same extreme consequences as the more stomach-turning earlier reveals of people like Weinstein and David Copperfield and others. In addition, in the stories that were being posted, there was little sense I heard resonating of anyone's inherent worth, in the accused's inherent worth, and no talk of ultimate second chances or rehabilitation. Instead, at its worst, we, the press, Americans, the collective Gestalt, seemed far more interested and focused on sheer punishment and humiliation. And although I understood that, still it worried me and made me a little bit sick inside. I felt both of these feelings side by side. Here were these stories like those of David Copperfield and Bill Cosby that made me see red. And yet, somehow I also felt there was the danger of making a blood sport of quick fix public morality. And I worried. It's always been dangerous to release the hounds on anyone. If for no other reason than it creates a world in which it is okay to release the hounds. And was I the only one thinking and feeling and anxious at night, wondering, when will they come for me? When will we change the focus to something I have failed at and come for me and not see me as a person with a history of good too, trying to do my best and failing? Yes, we swim in toxic waters. None of us is not poisoned by them. There is no perfect club, and there are 1,000 ways to fail. But we seem like a people out of touch with our own humanity. So stay with me. I want to acknowledge that I know I am trying to sail between Scylla and Charybdis right now. Right? Between that mythical sea monster on the one side and that whirlpool on the other. I'm not condoning evil. I'm not talking about abandoning justice. But I feel like there's somewhere different, right between the two, that we have to try and sail. And I fear for us if we don't. So maybe it's that lately it feels like in more ways than one, we as a nation are becoming extremist in our energies. To be sure, our current president is partly to blame. If the leader sets the tone for a company or a city or a nation, his tone has been extremist, quick fix, vapid response. But woe to us who follow his lead. Choose your enemies carefully, my mentor used to say. Choose your enemies carefully, for you shall become like them. I don't want to be extremist, quick fix, and not thoughtful in how I show up morally. But real moral discourse is countercultural. It takes time. It may need to skip a tweeting cycle or two. It may require quiet. Moral judgment is something of a reflex, but rarely is the best moral action reflexive. Something is missing. And here, I think, may be the seed of it. Always, I think, when justice was discussed, particularly in the traditions that fed into our Unitarian Universalist tradition, Judaism, Christianity, humanism, maybe paganism too, with its emphasis on balance, always justice was pressed right up against something else, a thing called mercy. Mercy and justice were two sides of a coin. Neither was supposed to exist alone, just like individualism and the right to be free was never supposed to exist alone as a value. It was supposed to be pressed right up against and balanced by the call to community, to the discipline and the surrender of the common good. So justice was one side of the coin and mercy was the other. One without the other was incomplete. Justice by itself was too harsh, too brutal. Mercy without justice was too tender-hearted, bordering on tolerant of ill and complicit in evil. But together, one tugging against the other and bounding it, the good could take root. Since August, I preach most Sundays in the church I serve in San Francisco that has two quotes up on the walls of the sanctuary, two quotes that people thought were important enough to write in big letters where they were hard to change. Two quotes that they wanted generations to remember. The first, the kingdom of God is within. Within all of us is the implication, even, by the way, those who transgress. And the other, Micah 6:8. The prophet's reminder that begins, "What does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God?" What a great quote. Do justice. Justice, that thing that is love in action. Love, the verb form of love, showing up like justice, especially for those waiting for it, hurting under its absence. Yes, do justice. But not only do justice, but also right alongside it, after a comma, love mercy. And listen again. It doesn't say do mercy. It says love mercy. Crave it with your heart. Desire it. In some versions of the scripture, in some translations, the word for mercy is translated as kindness, but that seems too weak for my taste, though I'm a big fan of kindness, actually. I am, as a central virtue, but it still feels too weak for my taste because elsewhere the word for mercy is used to describe what God shows humanity when God forgives us our sins and gives us a chance at life, freed, liberated from the burdens of all of our errors, the ultimate second chance, always and forever a gift of love. And given the list of what we human beings have done and continue to do to one another and to created life, even if you don't believe in something you would call God and you take that only as an imaginative construct, that is a generous clemency. Mercy, in that sense, is radical. It is big-hearted, unearned, and pretty damned transformatively liberating. Isn't it? Let's make it real. Has anyone ever acted toward you in what you would call a merciful way? They have with me. I wouldn't be married, actually, if mercy didn't exist. But my friendship with a woman who is my oldest and closest friend really began in a moment of mercy. I can still remember it. And maybe it happens this way a lot, that the most important lessons are often pressed into us when we are young, and they're simpler somehow. At least this one was. For us, it was 8th grade. Remember 8th grade, or if you're in the midst of it, bring that into this space. I got mad at something she had done, and then I talked bad about her out loud all the way down a long hall at school. Horrible things came out of my mouth. I know it's hard to believe. And only at the end of that long hall did I look back and see her trailing just 6 or 8 feet behind. And in that quiet hall, she had been able to hear every awful, mortifying word that I said. I tried to call her that night and apologize, but she refused to talk. But when she finally took my call, she didn't chew me out or end our friendship or a host of other things she would have had every reason to do. Instead, for reasons I will never completely understand, at the age of 13, she said to me instead in a quiet voice, "Let's just forget this ever happened and start over." I will never forget how that made me feel. I instantly felt this load of shame and guilt and self-recrimination lift, and I loved her. I loved her, and I knew in that moment that I would be loyal to her forever. Mercy, as Shakespeare wrote, is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. So it was for us. My friend's mercy not only healed a wound, she shifted the earth beneath our feet. She changed the direction we were on. She deepened both of us. There are plenty of stories out there about mercy and about just what kinds of transformations mercy does when it intercedes in the work of justice, too. South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission after apartheid is just one. Revolutionary love, Ruby Sales, the activist, said recently in a conference in New York, revolutionary love is not punitive. It is redemptive. To speak of mercy in the face of so much wrong, it can look like complicity or cowardice or worse. But I would counter that we, especially we who've inherited the universalist charge and challenge to put love in a much more central place than is easy or makes sense, for us, the call is to trust that risk. Plus, I just plain fear and would, I think, abhor a world in which love is an afterthought and mercy too. I want to say that I know this is a complicated subject. I know it's far more nuanced and thorny and vital than this sermon has the range or space to give to it. I know that this treatment is inherently flawed before it even begins. I know that some people have been asked to show mercy far too often with far too little justice. A museum just opened in Montgomery, Alabama on Thursday, testament to that. A colleague reminded me last night that in the Jewish tradition, God sits on the throne of justice, but on the Day of Atonement, when people show repentance, God moves to the seat of mercy, and only then. So there's a lot of unpacking to do. And I'd welcome the unpacking of it because I think there's a piece of the vision for who we Unitarian Universalists are called to be in this lamentable, hurting, vast, incredible gift of a world that's here. The last 2 years, we've been doing a lot of this work. We might be able to show people the way, a way. One last thought. The head of the Interfaith Council in San Francisco, Michael Pappas, was a Greek Orthodox priest in his former life. And when I mentioned that I was sitting with the question of justice and mercy, he said, "You know where the word mercy comes from, don't you?" Mercy, he said, comes from the word elios, which means olive, or the oil that comes from the olive. In ancient Greece, he said, that oil was considered a healing balm. There is something here, I think. Something about having to claim the moral power and legitimacy of mercy, as complicated as that territory is. And so the need to walk humbly in that direction. Something about what happens in that territory that is too vital, though, and too powerful and too holy to abandon. Something about what the other part of love in action looks like. Out beyond the ideas of right doing and wrong doing, the 3rd century Sunni mystical poet Rumi once wrote, there is a field. I'll meet you there. I'll take you there.
It is now time for this morning's offering for Living Cully, the Pacific Western Region Youth Scholarship Fund, and UU Rise. Please give generously. We should have some instructions on the screen for the various ways to give, and the card readers will be stationed in front of the large screens, 3 of them here in the room.
I'll take you there. I'll take you there. Sopranos in the room. sounds like this. I'll take you there. Will you sing it with me? Altos. I'll take you there. Sopranos and altos, where you at? Let's sing together. I'll take you there. Yeah, one more time. I'll take you there. And then the tenors go like this. I'll take you there. I'll take you there. And then the basses go. I'll take you there. I'll take you there. I know a place. I'll take you there. Ain't nobody crying. I'll take you there. Ain't nobody worrying. I'll take you there. Ain't no smiling faces. Say, lying to the races. I'll take you there. I know a place. Yeah, I'll take you there. Ain't nobody crying. I'll take you there. Ain't nobody worried now. I'll take you there. Ain't no smiling faces. Lying to the races. I'll take you there. Come on and help me. I'll take you there. I'll take you there. I'll take you there. One more time, say, I'll take you. If you know the solo, sing it with me. I know a place. I'll take you there. What? Crying. I'll take you there. Ain't nobody worried. Nobody worried. I'll take you there. Say ain't no smiling faces. I'll take you. Lying to the races. Lying to the races. I'll take you there. I know a place. I'll take you there. Ain't nobody crying. I'll take you there. You wanna do that one? Ain't no smiling faces. I'll take you there. A lion to the races. Do that one. Do that riff. Say. Yep. Hold on. So boy, way more, yeah, will you sing the riff with us? Let's do it again. Say, here we go. I know a place. I'll take you there. Ain't nobody crying. Ain't nobody worried. Ain't no smiling faces. I'll take you there. Lying to the races. Oh, come on, say, help me now. Mercy me. I'll take you there. Oh, I wanna take you there. I'll take you there. I wanna take you there. Ain't nobody worried. I'll take you there. Ain't no smiling faces. I'll take you there. All I am do the race, I won't do it. I'll take you I know a place I'll take you there. Oh, ain't nobody crying. And ain't nobody worrying.
I'll take you there.
Oh, ain't no smiling faces. I'll take you there. A lion to the races.
I'll take you there.
I'll take you there. I'll take you there. I'll take you there. I'll take you there. I'll take you there. I'll take you there. I'll take you there. I'll take you there. I'll take you there. I'll take you there. I'll take you there. One more time. I'll take you there. I'll take you there. I'll take you there.
Woohoo! So breathe in deep. Take each other's oxygen with you. Let it become part of your cells, your bodies, the spirit of this place literally in your tissue. Listen to the feet, reminding us of all who are walking the ways we are walking or trying our best to. Reminding us that we are not alone. Spirit of life and God of so many names and no name at all. May we know that we are not imperfect, but so much more perfect together. May we take courage in what the alchemy of humankind against all odds and against all evidence can do. Especially when there is a loyalty in our bones to the radical and redemptive love of our ancestors. It's always guided the best of what humankind can make possible. May it do so again. So grant us the wisdom of the ages and the perseverance of saints. May all of us travel home safely, back to the people and the places we love. May the best of what we found here seed and fertilize the gardens that we cultivate and the communities we till together. And may the best of this moment and ones like it take hold like some holy virus, infecting the world with a heart for mercy and a soul bound to justice and the unshakable, unlamentable, radical conviction that we are one. Blessings and great love and courage, my friends.
Courage, my friend, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home. The words of the South African protest: courage, my friend, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home. I encourage you, though, in the sense of expanding music, to know that there are different verbs by which we move.
And I would love if you'd entertain the notion of different means of movement. I would love if you walk to say, we will walk with you and sing your spirit home. I would love if you roll to say, we will roll with you and sing your spirit home. I would love if you go by some other way to say, we will go with you. If you don't listen closely enough, it will sound like tons of mistakes happening in milliseconds in the room. But if you listen closely, you will hear the promise of Unitarian Universalism in a millisecond. Use the verb that helps you to get into the room and into the song. It goes like this. Courage, my friend, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you, and sing your spirit home. One more time. Freedom, freedom, my friend, you do not go alone. We will walk with you, and sing your spirit home. Courage, my friend, you do not roll alone. We will roll with you and sing your spirit home. Dignity, dignity, my friend, you do not go alone. We will walk with you, and sing your spirit. We will go with you, and sing your spirit home. We will roll with you, and sing your spirit home. 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 And sing your spirit
home. Stay just as you are, hands together. Feel this embodied representation of the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And in our goings and our comings, may the light of love shine upon us, out from within us, be gracious unto us, and grant us peace. For this is the day we are given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Amen.
Amen.
Okay.